this? You meet up with a guy who robs you, who could have raped you, who could have murdered you in cold blood. You actually decide to go meet up with this guy so you can get a couple of necklaces back. And then you're like, so why didn't you rape me? Can we just start that out before you go? And he's like, oh yeah, you too pretty. You know what? You're right. What kind of story is this? Hey, welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise. Today we're doing another chapter of Worthy. And today we're going to find our way out of the Be More streets. If you were with us last time, we were on an extended journey through her life as queen pin slinging dope. And of course, there was a lot of us wondering about the truth of some of those stories. We may never know. You know, she would have us believe that she was really rising up through the different levels of the street life. And one of the things that she talked about last chapter that I didn't cover extensively but will come up in this chapter was the fact that she had decided to try dealing drugs in an area of town where there wasn't anybody else dealing drugs because there was only one exit out of this particular part of town. It was sort of like a peninsula that sort of jutted out into the water, and so there was only one entrance and exit to this particular place, so nobody was dealing at this spot because it's unsafe. You know, what if something happens? You can't get out. Well, she decided to take it upon herself to start dealing there at an apartment building at the bottom of this big hill. And I had an arrangement with a woman there, and, you know, she dealt drugs out of the lady's front door, you know. So that's going to come into play this week. You know, it was a long drawn out story last time, not really worthy of our full attention, but you should know that little background piece. Now, in this chapter, we're going to talk about how her mother finds out what she's up to. Her friends start being like, what exactly is happening here? You know, and, you know, Tupac's gone. And it's just starting to become evident that she may not be the queen pin that she wants the world to believe, and that she tries to tell herself that she is. She gets herself into some, like, seriously bad situations in this chapter. So this is chapter 6. It's called A Gate to Many Roads. I don't really know what that's referencing. But anyway, she is going to find her way off the Be More streets in this chapter. And, you know, it's a pretty interesting chapter. She's a little bit more reflective in this chapter, which always makes it more interesting. Now, she starts it out by saying that she had applied to Juilliard. I am very shocked that she applied to Juilliard and seemingly to nowhere else. The hubris of thinking that you would just apply to Juilliard and your confidence would help you sail right through those doors is beyond the beyonds to me. But she had applied to Juilliard, and she starts the chapter by saying, the envelope addressed to me from the Juilliard School arrived in the spring of 1989. Before I opened it, I imagined how my acceptance would begin. We are pleased to inform you. And then it would present the next step for passing through this all-important gate to adulthood. Then she tells us about when she auditioned for Juilliard, and her self-confidence is staggering on self-obsession to the point where she didn't even think there was any kind of way that they would not want her. The Juilliard School was and is the mecca for college-level conservatory performing arts training, and if you ascended into the ranks of the chosen ones there, that meant that you were the real deal. At the audition, I was super confident, and I knew that I'd be accepted. Then I would decide whether I would attend. You know, you guys can put your offer out there. I'll decide. Who would get an offer from Juilliard and be like, well, I don't know. Part of the confidence came from winning talent shows, dance battles, my training at BSA, and getting every professional gig I'd ever auditioned for since I was 8 and had landed a role in the ensemble of Baltimore's ballet production of The Nutcracker. I don't know a lot about ballet. I wasn't one of those little girls that did ballet. Not that I didn't want to, but, you know, there wasn't a penny to spare. But I had a lot of friends who did do ballet who didn't really seem to have a hard time getting into the city's productions of The Nutcracker. And none of these people were like something to write home about. So, I mean, that's good and all, but like, I don't know if getting into the ensemble of the Baltimore Ballet's production of The Nutcracker would be the thing that would convince me that Juilliard was just around the corner. But, you know, maybe I just don't really understand the competitive nature of maybe Baltimore's ballet. Maybe it was very competitive. Maybe it was super hard to get a spot there. Who knows? But, winning a dance battle down at the club is not necessarily enough of a feather in your cap to believe that Juilliard is on the table. I don't know. But she says that what further helped her. But she says that what further helped her to believe that she would manage it was that she had been cast in a professional production of August Wilson's Joe Turner's Come and Gone in Baltimore Center Stage. And she was cast to play the part of Zonia, a young girl wanting to find her mother, but not wanting to be separated from her father. She said, what I loved most about acting was bringing a character to life by finding the part of myself that I could draw from. She says he was also like her favorite playwright. So obviously that's why she liked to play. This isn't unique to her, but I do think it's worth saying that I think all actors and actresses are wildly self-consumed. And that is the reason that they so enjoy acting, is because it's another stage for them to express themselves on. I get to bring myself into this character. It gets to be all about me. I get to marinate in me in order to present this character. I get to just dig around in my worst memories to help me cry harder. I get to think about the most exciting moments to help me act happier. It's all about me. It's all a meditation on me through this other character. But it's startling to me, the lack of insight that you would admit that out loud. I loved acting because really it was about me. But then she's not unique in that. And I want to be clear. She's not unique in that. The reviews of my performance were very positive. And the experience was a good one. So obviously, since I was cast in this adult production, Juilliard's around the corner. I mean, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about that. They'd be lucky to have me. She says that her family was really proud of her and continued to support her and support this idea of her acting. And, in the last chapter, she said something that was very interesting. She said that school was a thing that she did as an option for the world, as an option for a career, as an option for the world to come. What am I going to be? When I get out of here, I guess I'll be an actress. But it was plan B of plan A. A was be the queen pin on the Be More Street slinging dope. That's where she really wanted to have her come up. She said that in the last chapter. And all of her actions would speak to that purpose. Here she was, never going to school, phoning it in at various events. And so for her to act now like Juilliard was an option for her when she didn't take school seriously for Juilliard to be an option, it just speaks to her wild self-confidence, and not in a good way. Not like, yeah, I've put in the work, I know I can do this, but in the who wouldn't want me? I'm just like this super bright, I just show up into a room and the whole room starts revolving around me. I can just go into that audition, slap down whatever I do, and I'm in. That is, she just had no conception that the competition would eliminate her because she hasn't taken the job seriously. Anyway, Grandma Shirley, who has always been kind of a plain speaker, you'll remember Grandma Shirley from previous chapters. She was a grandmother who would drink heavily and watch TV and entertain herself, laughing and cackling and screaming in the kitchen while Jada hid upstairs. Well, Grandmother Shirley has really put a damper on Jada's career thus far by sort of trying to bring Jada down to reality a lot. And Jada didn't appreciate it. Now, Grandmother Shirley was keeping a scrapbook of all the things that Jada did. So in her way, she was being supportive. But she also wanted to remind Jada, hey, you need an off-ramp that isn't acting because that might not happen for you. And she chose the time to tell Jada this right after this big performance. She says that in the wake of her grandfather Grant's declining health, Grandma Shirley, who had been almost a shut-in and never left the house, had to sort of begin to venture out and start taking care of grandfather Grant in a way that he had previously taken care of her. So now she's the one going out and doing shopping. She's the one going out and doing errands. And because she was now venturing outside of the house, she started going to Jada's performances. But after one performance, she came up to Jada, and Jada's beaming. She's in the lobby. Somebody just handed her a big bouquet of flowers. She's getting all the praise and everything. Grandma Shirley comes up and says, "Good job tonight, but you need to start planning for college and prepare for an actual career. Acting won't pay your bills." And Jada says that was Shirley. Standing in that lobby, still high from a great performance, I held my tongue and the bouquet of flowers that someone had just handed me. Shirley's words echoed in my ears as I opened the envelope from Juilliard, and it began, "We regret to inform you, ... or words to that effect. I had not been accepted. Now, that comes as zero surprise to us, but probably to the, full-blown, egotistical young Jada, that would have been a shock. It makes sense why this was a surprise to her. She says that all my life of auditions flashed before my eyes. I had never been rejected. Juilliard proved there's always a first time. My ego was shattered and my feelings were hurt. I felt the self-doubt overwhelm me. Maybe I really don't have what it takes to make it outside of Baltimore. I took the rejection as a sign that I was meant to keep working on my other career, building my empire in the streets." But see, if you'll recall, like I said from the last chapter, that was already priority number one. Building her empire in the streets was the hopes and dreams. That's where all her effort was being placed. That's why she's cutting school so that she can make her deliveries and whatnot. So for her to genuinely be shocked that she didn't get into the all-holy Juilliard is surprising. Really? So you made it to a couple of auditions, but you don't care enough about school to make it the priority. You're not getting into Juilliard. Now, you'll remember that Donald Hicken was the teacher who she liked most. And the last time we heard about him, he was turning a blind eye to the fact that she could never actually make it to school on time, or ever. And he had given her pass. But now he sees that she really needs to get herself off the streets. He sees the trajectory of her life. So he convinces her that she needs to go out for auditions when the University of North Carolina School of Arts comes to do their auditions for the seniors. And she poo-poos that idea. North Carolina School of Arts, please. Gross. And she tells him, "No, thank you. That's not the school for me. I'm destined for greatness, Juilliard. And they rejected me, so on to the streets." And he gave her all the reasons why he was a big fan of the school, and he said that it was in league with the other top performing art programs like Juilliard, Yale, and Carnegie Mellon, and so on. And he said that, in his opinion, she was a triple threat because she could act, dance, and sing. So who wouldn't want her? So she should really go to this audition. I don't know anything about the University of North Carolina School of Arts. Maybe it does have a stellar program. Now, I would also not say that I am well informed on all the performing arts colleges. So, forgive me if you are an attendant of that school. Maybe it really is in league with those big top three. But there's a part of me that kind of thinks that perhaps he sold her on it because he just didn't want to see her waste her life and be gunned down in the streets because he knew full well what she was up to. Anyway, he knew that she was in trouble, so he he pushes her to go do this audition. And she says that she decided to audition one of her favorite monologues from Antigone when she must plead for the right to bury her brother. She says she'd done it countless times in class. She knew it backwards and forwards, probably could say it in her sleep. And Donald Higgins had worked with her and mentored her through it and through every inflection and every, pause and all of this. I mean, she knew it backwards and forwards. But then when the day came for her to audition, she's over there hemming and hawing, shuffling her feet, can't make up her mind to actually go in and do it. And he's over there trying to prop her up and be like, come on. And he tells her, "Jada, you have more talent in the tip of your pinky finger than most people have in their whole bodies. You don't want to see where that can take you? What are you going to do here, huh? Keep running around with your friends, not giving yourself a real opportunity to do something with your life?" He was really at his wit's end. So finally, she's just like, "Fine, since I do have so much talent in this little pinky finger, I guess I will bless those in there with my performance." So she went in, but she does say, "It cannot be overstated how much my mind was completely and resolutely made up. Winston-Salem could have been on the planet Mars for all I knew or cared, because I was not going there. I was not going to give control of my future to anybody. I was in these Be More streets, and that's going to make my mark." The fact that you would even want to keep rolling in the Be More streets when there was any opportunity for you to get out shocks me to my very core. I guess she had enough cash in her pockets to make it seem like a viable option. But there began to be cracks in her self-confidence over whether she could rule these Be More streets. And her friend Keisha is the one who gave her first knock. Now, Keisha was one of her many, 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 many friends that she told us all about in the last chapter. But you don't need to know about that in order to know that Keisha was, the best character that's come into the story thus far, because she is not having any of this anymore. She says Keisha was the first person to really call me out on the choices I'd been making. She knocked me right off my high horse, a bit. She says that there'd been this building tension between the two of them, and she couldn't quite place what it was. She knew that it had something to do with Keisha's disdain for her lifestyle choices and the way she was running and shaking and moving in the streets. And so she said that she decided to take Keisha to dinner and that she would offer this sort of olive branch, which was jewelry. And they both loved jewelry. And she knew that if she gave Keisha this very nice piece of jewelry, then maybe Keisha would be like, girl, it's fine that you're, slinging dope in the streets or whatever it is she was hoping Keisha would say. She says that she believed her gift would close the distance and would ease the tension between the two of them. Now, she says, when I handed her the present, she sadly sighed and took a beat before opening it. To my shock, she was not impressed in the least. Instead, she had an air of disappointment and fear. I can't take this, she said and handed the gift back to me. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair, knowing exactly why. What are you doing, Jada? She asked. That was not a question I was ready to answer. Keisha went on to tell me she couldn't understand why I was throwing my life away and that I was going to end up in jail or dead. I wasn't ready to make a change, but I didn't forget what she said. Apparently, I needed a bigger warning. She's going to get that. But she says that reality continued to knock away at this sort of fantasy world that she had been building. And so Keisha calls to her account. Then she says reality hit her again before graduation, when they're all devastated to receive the news about one of their beloved classmates who had been killed in a car accident coming home from a weekend trip with her boyfriend. She says that was a cruel blow and evidence that things out of my control can take a fatal turn. It seems so unfair and random. Her death made me take a closer look at my choices. But what really helped her to take stock of the danger she was putting herself in by her own choice was when she went on up to Cherry Hill to do her selling. Now, Cherry Hill is the place that I referred to earlier that was like the peninsula that sort of went out into the water that nobody else would deal at because it was such a dangerous in and out. There's only one exit, so, you get hemmed in pretty quick by the police or by whoever might want to gun you down and take your drugs. So she says that, usually when she went up that way, she didn't go all decked out looking good, But this time she had been skating at Painter's Mill. That was her big hangout. And she was dressed to a T. Her pockets were loaded with cash. She had a bunch of jewelry on. And she went on a quick run to Cherry Hill. She said, I never went to Cherry Hill laced like that, but I didn't worry. I wasn't planning to be there any longer than 15 minutes to drop off some product. But she says that while she was there, some dude that she'd served before but had gotten bad vibes from decided to show up at her door again. And when she asked him to show her his money and saw that he had it, she decided that, this one time she'd make an exception to her previous rule that she wouldn't serve him. She says, show me your money. And through the peephole, I could see, sure enough, he'd got a wad of cash. All right, hold up. And I turned to make sure that I've got the amount of product requested. Once I have it in hand, I open the door, leaving the chain on to make the transaction. As though a chain on a door is really going to help you if the thug wants to get in. I never understood that little bit of safety, It's like, okay, that is a lot of faith and trust in that little chain. Well, lo and behold, two guys decide to kick the door in. She says, before I could grab his money, two dudes jump out, both holding 9mm as they kick the door open, breaking the safety chain, and point their guns at my face. In terror, I fall back into the recliner I'm usually posted in, and I pee my pants. Ooh. One of the dudes presses closer to me, points the 9mm in the middle of my head. The woman who lived there crawled under the dining room table, shaking and shivering. The guy with the gun on her head told her to take off her jewelry. And he was real calm and cool about it, but she was terrified. She says, I was terrified as hell in pissy pants and all, but I couldn't help talking shit. She said that she started taking off her bracelets and jabbering, why you effing with me? What, you can take my little bit of shit? And this dude, he's not paying her any mind. And he's like, yep, I want all this. He's telling his friend in there, make sure that you get all the product, get all the stash, take whatever they have. They're robbing the joint. And he says, that he wants all her cash, all her drugs, all her money. So she dumps her pockets out of cash. She gives him all the product she has. He takes some of the jewelry that she's already taken off. And he says that he wants the gold chains that she wears around her ankles as well. So she starts taking them off. And as she began to take off the ankle chains, he turns around to direct his friends about some other, items he should be taking. And she says, in that moment, I quickly ripped off a gold She says, in that moment, I quickly ripped off a white gold necklace with a small diamond solitaire pendant attached that had been given to me by my stepfather, Tony, and I threw it under my tongue. They were not getting that piece no matter what. Not that I was so sentimental, no. That diamond necklace had become a symbol of my worth as a human, so much so I was willing to risk my life for it. Now, I think that's interesting, but how so? How so had this diamond solitaire necklace been a memento to her of her humanity? I think that's very interesting, and I'm not making fun of her for it. I think we do have a tendency to make sort of talismans out of different items, but I don't know why she's acting like because it was from Tony, that's not why it was a sign of her humanity. He had treated her like a human. He cared about her. He had watched out for her. So for her not to attach this and to say this necklace was not sentimental, but it was a token of my humanity, I don't understand that passage. And I wish she'd explain it more. Like, what was this about it? There's something there that she either can't express or verbalize or won't express and verbalize. But it's unfortunate because I would have liked to know. She says that the main dude, let's call him C, grabbed the rest of my jewelry and then proceeded to move out. And she says that as they backed out of the apartment with the gun still pointed at me, he says their eyes locked. And she could see all these thoughts running through his head. Should I kill her? She knows who I am. I could kidnap her, rape her. I know he was trying those thoughts on for size, but he backed out slowly, paused for one more glance, and then closed the door. She says that as soon as she left, she called Fawn, one of her friends, and she was letting her know what had happened and that she was going to be late to the girl's house because that's where she had been intended to go. And she says, that's just what you do in those circumstances. You don't sit there and dwell on your near-death experience. You just try to keep moving and not think too hard about it. But then she did call her friend BP. Now, you remember BP? She was using him for all of his connections and what he might know and how he could help her out. So she calls him and is like, hey, guess what just happened? And he says, well, didn't you use the gun I gave you? I gave you a .22. And she's like, no, it didn't even cross my mind to use the gun because that's just not how she was built, she says. But she's like, it was clear that she'd been set up and she was mad at herself for letting it happen. But she was really, really, really mad about what had been stolen from her. She wanted that jewelry back. And she said to BP, did he think it was possible for her to, have a meetup with this guy and maybe get that jewelry back? That's wild. Why would you? I would just be like, I escaped once with my life. This guy didn't do anything to me. I never want to set eyes on that guy again. I never, ever want him to see me and maybe reconsider that perhaps he should have killed me the first time. But she says that BP immediately identified the stick-up dude as C. He knew the guy. The guy was notorious for robbing folks in that area. So he, knowing the guy, arranged a meeting at her request because she said she wanted her stuff back. Wild. That's wild to me that the guy would be like, yeah, I'll come back, give you some of your stuff back. Why would he do that? Anyway, I don't even pretend to understand what's going on in the Be More streets. But she says that, of course, there wasn't any hope that she'd get the cash or the drugs back, but the jewelry he might not have been able to pawn yet. She says that we met on the side street in the hill a few days later, as BP predicted. And C gave me back a few pieces of my jewelry that he hadn't sold. Our meeting was brief, but before we left, I had to ask something. You left me there. How come? Why would you want to bring that up? Seriously, why would you be like, how come you didn't rape me? Why didn't you murder me? What was happening there? And so he says he looked at me for a second with eyes that appeared as if he had never felt a warm touch in his life. And he said, you were too pretty. And you know what's crazy, says Jada. That was the first time I actually believed it. What? Of all the times you could believe that compliment, that's wild. That's wild. What kind of a story is this? What kind of story is this? You meet up with a guy who robs you, who could have raped you, who could have murdered you in cold blood. You actually decide to go meet up with this guy so you can get a couple of necklaces back. And then you're like, so why didn't you rape me? Can we just start that out before you go? And he's like, oh yeah, you too pretty. You know what? You're right. What kind of story is this? Okay. Anyway, she says that's the last time that the Cherry Hill saw the likes of her. And 2 weeks later, this guy was arrested for the murder of 2 drug dealers that he'd shot up in the trunk of a car, and he was sent to prison. And it still didn't register with her how lucky she was. Jada, are you on drugs? What is happening here? But even that wasn't enough to help her realize she needed to get out of the Be More streets. So she goes to her friend Chet. Now, you'll recall from the last chapter that Chet was like top dog in her world. And the whole reason she had any product in the first place was because Chet had given it to her to sell. So now she's out money, she's out cash. And so she meets with Chet at a car wash to say, hey, really sorry about that, man. And she says that he, was like, hey, you're good. I'm just glad you're still alive. You'll get it to me. And she says he wasn't stressed about her setback, but she was. And she promised to pay him back. And in the future, she says that she did tenfold. Maybe when she became famous, she showed back up with some cash. Who knows? But she's defeated and she's deflated. And she feels like she has really failed at what she had attempted to do with her life. First she wanted to go to Juilliard, couldn't do that. Then she is trying to be this queen pin and she can't do that. So when BP, the other guy that's helping her sort of scale up the ladder, says, hey, I need your help on this job real quick. Why don't you come with me? She agrees to do it, just kind of like looking for an in, trying to find her footing again in this world. She says that what they were trying to do, apparently, has been lost to the haze of memory. How convenient. But it had something to do with the basement in a house of one of his relatives where he was using to stash all of his product. And she says that the basement had been flooded, so he needed to go down there, get his stuff, open up the safe down there, get out his money, whatever, and just, evacuate the premises. No longer a good place. So they were going to go move some product. They were going to get the money from the safe. But she says that when they pulled up to the house, she got a really bad feeling. She should have listened to her intuition because it is going to be some craziness as soon as she sets foot into that house. But she ignored it. She's like, no, I'm with BP. He's going to take care of me. Nothing bad could happen with him. He got my jewelry back from C, so I guess this guy's got connections. I'll be fine. She says when they walked into the house, the front door was open, letting some air in. The screen door was propped open. So they go into the house, deathly quiet. And she starts, feeling the bad vibes, but they've got a job to do. So they're walking down the stairs. She can see 2 inches of water all over the floor down there. It's not nasty yet. It had just flooded. So she's like, oh, we're just going to get in, get out. It's not a big thing. But as soon as they're down at the bottom of the stairwell, who should come charging down after them but some stranger with a gun, 9mm gun. And he points the gun at her first and demands that she stand on top of a cot in the corner of the basement. Back up, he orders. And she's like, oh, shit, this again. And she says, everything in my nervous system went cold. She says she put her hands to the air up to her shoulders. She was scared. And she's like, I wasn't going to piss myself again. And she says she knew that he meant business. His eyes had no soul, no fear, just animosity. And her heart was pounding. And she says that she knew in that moment everything was going to go really wrong really quick. If by the grace of God, she manages to get out of this one, she's never going to go back to the Be More streets. She just knows it. She can't do this anymore. She says that the guy's got his gun pointed at her and he's using her as a pawn in all of this. She says, of course, BP would have dealt with this very differently, but the guy is using her and saying, I'm going to shoot her. If you make one wrong step, open the safe. And they end up having this big, big fight because this guy claims that there's some friend named T. Rowe. T. Rowe owes money to this guy. And he's a friend of BP's. BP's like, I don't know anything about that guy. I don't know where he is. No. T. Rowe didn't tell me anything when he decided to skip town 2 weeks ago. I don't know anything about it. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Meanwhile, the guy's taken the gun off of Jada. Now this intruder has decided, hey, you know what? Forget T. Rowe. Just open the safe. Give me the product. Give me the drugs. Give me the money. Give me everything you have. And then I'm out of here. So what made Jada feel so badly was she knew that her presence was interfering with the way BP would be handling this. And also, she couldn't do anything about it. She couldn't jump on this guy. She couldn't help BP beat this guy. She's just 5 foot, 95 pounds. She is making this situation worse, not better. And she's endangering BP because he can't handle this situation. And, he's too distracted by preserving her safety that he can't deal with this intruder. So, finally the guy, he leaves, he robs them blind, he pistol whips BP, BP is real up against it apparently in this situation. When the guy finally leaves, BP looks over her with a mouthful of blood and says, you okay? I'm okay, I said. I tried my best to muster a steely exterior, but the truth is, I was not okay. Not at all. She says we're still alive, but what played in my head was the cold truth. There will be a day when you won't be so lucky, a day when you may not make it out alive. Yeah, I feel like both of these instances would be real sobering. Real sobering. But what really tipped her over the edge was when Mama found out about the drug dealing. She says, my mother's first wake-up call was finding empty bags of product in my room, which led her to assume, incorrectly, that I had become an addict. Well, why do you got these plastic bags of empty product in your room? Who else? I mean, why would any mother be like, this is an empty bag with cocaine residue in it, crack residue in it. Why wouldn't you throw the bag away, Jada? Are you that nasty that you're just leaving these nasty drug bags just hanging around your room? Like, what are you talking about? Anyway, she may have decided to search my room because girls who came to the OBGYN clinic where she worked, called Total Healthcare, deep in the West B. Moore, were constantly telling her, we be seeing your daughter hanging out in Cherry Hill. That's how it's written, y'all. I'm not adding. My daughter, she does not go to Cherry Hill, my mother would reply. Your daughter be down there all the time. You guys, I'm only reading what's written on the page. So when she found empty plastic bags with white powder residue in them and a hole in my wall, she came to me. Jada, how long you been using? What? She showed me the bags. Mom, not using, I replied, frustrated. I tried to make up all kinds of excuses. Let's just call them lies. None of which she bought. Eventually, I confessed that I had dabbled in selling. Dabbled? Okay, either that's the greatest truth we've heard yet, or she's lying straight to her mom's face. I can't really tell with this one. Anyway, she didn't believe me, and then I demanded to take a piss test. Fine, Mama, test me, says Jada. And the pee came back clean. She says, but it really hit the fan when she heard about through the grapevine, because the streets talk, about the robbery in Cherry Hill. She couldn't believe it. You were dealing in Cherry Hill? Have you lost your mind? Adrian had gone red. I stayed cool because she was quick with her hands. Now, this is the first time in 2 paragraphs where Jada is going to make this innuendo that Adrian often hit her in fits of rage. She said a few weeks prior, I had gotten into the University of North Carolina School of Arts, and I told my mother that I didn't want to go. And before she found out about Cherry Hill, Adrian had placated her in her indecision. Oh, well, that's okay, baby girl. You think on it and stew on it, and maybe you'll come to a conclusion. But now, with the new information, the patience was gone. All this talk about you not going to school? F that. You get the hell out of here. I bet you that. You understand me? I had my stoic whatever expression on my face. Adrian stepped over to me and snarled through her teeth. Play with me if you want. Take your ass out on that concrete. With this, I needed to pull back and get myself in respectful alignment. I'd promised myself that there would never be a day when my mother and I had a physical fight. I humbled myself quick. Adrian was no longer in a cheery, time to go to college mode. Start packing your stuff, now. Now, good for Adrian. Adrian is the reason that Jada got off them B-more streets, because if it hadn't been for Adrian, I think that Jada probably would have continued to just sort of go on her merry way. I think she would have calmed her beating heart over what had just happened and figured she'd just be more careful next time. But Adrian forces her to get her act together. She said school started in 2 weeks, but she still needed $1,500 to go. In the not too distant past, she wouldn't have any trouble coming up with that money. But now she doesn't really have what she used to have. She's kind of lost her connections. And quite frankly, she's not in a position anymore to borrow more drugs from Chet to sell to sort of regain her position on the streets. She says that she could have collected the money from all the dudes she knew at the snap of a finger, but she refused. She says, I wasn't going like that. Besides, I was hoping the money wouldn't come through and I wouldn't have to go anyway. Okay. What I think is if you could collect money from a bunch of people, as your last final move before getting off them B-more streets, who wouldn't do that? Who wouldn't be like, well, they do owe me money, so I'm going to go collect that, and then maybe I'll quit selling drugs. Who would be like, there's thousands of dollars out there, and, it's mine for the taking, but I'm just not going to? That just leads me to believe the money wasn't there, and that you couldn't just go call up a couple of guys and be like, hey, you know what, you owe me, blankety blank, blank, blank. I hardly believe it. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Adrian rose to the occasion and found the $1,500. And Jada's attitude was that she was being forced into exile. She says, insult upon injury. I wasn't allowed to take my car or have one on campus as a freshman, and I procrastinated on packing until the night before I was supposed to leave. Adrian came in and was like, you better pack that stuff, because I'm not playing. So the next morning, despite her resistance, she packed all her stuff and she got in the car. There was no need for tearful goodbyes with my closest friends, because in her mind, she'd be right back. She didn't say a word the entire 6-hour drive to North Carolina. They all sat in silence. But she says the closer we got to Winston-Salem, the more relaxed I felt. She says that there was some peace in the slower tempo, and she thought about the last conversation she'd had with Chet. She really thought that she and Chet were going to come up together through those Be More streets. And she was sorry to see him go because she didn't want to miss out. But he had told her, I'm happy for you, and you do need to get out of here. Chet knew she didn't have what it took, And, he threw her a bone when he said, I thought we were going to be Bonnie and Clyde. But he didn't really mean it. Because how could she have been? She's 5 feet, 95 pounds. She can't even defend herself and hold up. And if she's not comfortable using her gun, I just don't know how she's going to be slinging dope in the Be More streets, Maybe it was time for me to be just a theater student on the straight and narrow, which I think is hilarious because I've never met a theater student who was ever on the straight and narrow. But anyway, that's what she says she wanted to do. She says that as soon as she got there, she found a friend from back in the day, back in the streets of Bmore. There was a woman named Mia Pitts, and it had been one of her friends, best friends, that they hadn't really been close at the time, but now that they were in a different environment, they were tight. She said that little Mia Pitts was preppy, proper, and had this sort of upbeat manner. But don't take her for soft because she was made by the Be More streets. She's as tough as any of them. And, she goes on to tell about her college experience. She was only there for 1 year. She says that the beautiful part of the experience that we had in North Carolina is that I could go and be on the go as much as I had ever been. She liked to go out and party and stuff, but it was without the dangers I met at home. Don't get it twisted. The streets of North Carolina and the hustlers who keep them found me. And I had opportunity and temptation in the streets of North Carolina. That's kind of funny. But I got focused on becoming the theater arts student on the straight and narrow. Besides, my housing and food were basically covered, so why not be broke and make the best of being a college student? I was starting to like it. She said that Pac and her were still talking, and she said that he told her he was really proud of her and that he encouraged her to stay focused on school. And they said, if you ever need anything, just let me know. I'll be happy to send you some money. And she's like, no, I'm cool. She didn't want to tell him that she needed anything. She didn't want to ask him for anything. But Pac's making his own money in California now. So she said after every conversation, she'd end up getting some cash in the mail from him. Oh, how the tables had turned, she says, how the tables had turned. She spends the rest of this chapter talking about various performances from different actors and actresses that she saw that really inspired her desire to just go to Hollywood already and do it. She just didn't really see that there was that much she could learn here at the school because she had spent her entire high school years working on acting, and really what could this college experience do but waste her money? She felt like it was just the time to hit the road and make it to Hollywood already. Now, I do want to say this one thing before we move on and talk about, this last bit of the chapter when she tells her mom she's just going to go to Hollywood already and quit college. I do think that it's interesting that she can at least name performances that she was inspired by and becoming an actress in her own right. When we read about Meghan Markle, it's hard to even remember that she was an actress, mostly because there really was nothing in her acting career that is of notable worth. If people knew her, it was from that show Suits, but there wasn't any movies or anything like that people were like, oh yeah, Meghan Markle, And people can say all they want. Oh, Jada Pinkett Smith only became famous because she married Will. I don't necessarily think that's true. I mean, people knew who she was. She may not have been a huge household name, but I remember knowing who she was in the 90s. And, I wasn't particularly well versed in all the nuanced celebrities of Hollywood, so I remember who she was. But my point in bringing this up is with Meghan Markle, she always said that she wanted to be an actress, but nobody ever remembers her ever enjoying film. Nobody ever remembers her noting any kind of specific performances. Nobody ever saw her revel in the art that is acting. So for her to then want to claim that, acting was this big thing and that it was really hard for her to want to give up just sort of rang false because number one, she didn't really have the career, but then number two, she'd never shown a passion for it. Jada is different in the sense that she knew who she wanted to become as an actor and she was inspired by certain performances, and she did love movies and the making of film and she is a little bit more authentic in her claim to be an actress. And like I said, she wasn't a no-name, despite what people want to say about her. Oh, she only became famous because of Will. That's not really true. So I will say that though I don't know that she was ever, a super inspirational actress. I don't think anybody's like, I just couldn't get over how well Jada did and such and such. I would say that she was at least more serious about her craft, Anyway, it suddenly dawns on her that there's no reason for her to be dragging her feet. She could be having profound performances like Denzel Washington in Glory. So why not hustle on over to Hollywood and just get it done already? She says, in my opinion, I didn't need to stay in the program at UNC any longer. A lot of what I was learning was just putting finishing touches on what I'd started years earlier at BSA. Right before the end of my freshman year, I called my mother with my plan. Hey, Ma, she said, I don't think it makes sense to do 3 more years of college for acting. So you got 2 choices. I can go to law school and become a lawyer, or I could go to LA and see if I can really do this acting thing. Without hesitation, my mother answered, Hollywood it is. What else was her mom going to say? Oh yeah, with your great grades in school and your persistent drive towards the academic, I absolutely think that law school's on the agenda for you. That's totally something you could do. I mean, really, what makes Jada think that anybody would have encouraged her to law school? She said earlier in this chapter that when they graduated her from BSA, it was basically a gift to her because she hadn't ever showed up to any classes or legitimately really passed anything. So for her to now be like, it was either acting or being a lawyer, what are you talking about? Classic. So even her mother knew that, Jada's 2 options were really 1 option. All right, that's the end of that chapter. Next time we come together, we are going to be on part 2 of the book. This book is divided into like 4 parts. So we're down 1 part, you guys. We've done well. And next section is all about her going into Hollywood. So I think it'll be more interesting. I think there will be more names and more instances that we begin to connect with, like, oh yeah, I remember when she did that, or oh yeah, that I recall that, or oh, that's how there's a connection there. So I think that'll be more interesting. I don't know. I haven't read ahead. I don't have the will to read ahead. I read what I have to before I bring it to you. Anyway, I will see you guys later this week, and I hope you have a good one. Bye.